please say your name and the class year, and then after that, spell your name.
Jose Pincay Delgado.
In a full sentence. My name is.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Please,
Paraphrasing.
thank you.
My name is Jose Pincay Delgado, class of 1977. My name is spelled Jose, P as in Peter, Incay hyphen Delgado.
Awesome, man. The only tip I have is try not to look at the lens because it looks like we're not doing our job by making sure you look this way.
So just look at
Yeah,
me.
always.
Okay,
Nothing else.
sorry.
Just
No.
right here. Okay. You gonna do that? Do it again. Yeah.
Nice.
Okay. Yeah. Let's run it back again.
Okay.
So, I am Jose, and your class.
Yeah.
year.
I'm Jose Pincay Delgado from the grade class of 1977. My name is spelled Jose Pincay hyphen Delgado.
Thank you. Okay. And did you attend public or private school prior to Princeton?
Prior to Princeton, I went. I'm a foreign student. I was a foreign student, so I came from Ecuador. Finished high school, public high school in Newark, New Jersey. I was advanced a year and before coming to Princeton. So
Okay, great. And how did you prepare for Princeton, both socially and intellectually?
I never thought about preparing so I can go to Princeton because it wasn't in my mind that I was going to go to Princeton or Yale or any of the. I wasn't thinking about that at the time. When I came to this country, I thought I was going to go to school here for a year to learn English because that was not my native language. So socially in Newark, New Jersey, my high school was a large community of Portuguese, Cubans, and African Americans, and it was a public school. So as far as academic, I excel in the school. Out of 363, which was the graduating class, I was ranked number 9, and I did high school in 3 years. So I was learning English, but I knew the stuff that they were teaching. So academically, I did very well. But I wasn't doing it with the thought that I was going to go to university in this country. It turned out that I was, so it was good.
Okay. And why did you choose to go to Princeton?
I knew I had a very good guidance counselor in high school. My best friend.
Can you paraphrase? Why did you go to Princeton?
When it was time to go to college and apply, I never thought that I would get into one of the top schools in the country. But my best friend from high school, which was this Cuban guy, who taught me English quite a bit, actually, and he was ranked like 3 in the class. He was a nerd. I was not a nerd, though, but he was. I decided to apply to the same schools that he was applying to, and he was only applying to 4 schools. He applied to Princeton, Brown, Chicago. No, that's it, those 3. And back then, I did a whole bunch of research on schools, and Chicago was my top choice. Harvard was my second choice. Princeton was my third choice. So I applied to those schools, and I applied to a whole bunch of other schools, including the ones that he was applying, which was Brown. And he got into Chicago. I got into Chicago. He got into Brown. I did not get into Brown. I was waitlisted at Harvard, and I got into Princeton. He did not get into Princeton. So the choice for me was clear. I was going to go to Chicago. However, Chicago decided that they couldn't give me any financial aid as I was a foreign student, and so it was out of the question. And I didn't get into Brown, he did, so he said, well, I'm going to Chicago. And I said, well, I guess it's either Harvard or Princeton. So I took myself out of Harvard, and I decided to come to Princeton after I visited Princeton, because Princeton didn't recruit me, Chicago did, and Harvard did. But Princeton's like, good, you're okay, you can come if you want. But so I did come to Princeton before when I was admitted with my aunt and talked to professors, and I just felt in love. This is it. This is my place. So I accepted. And the week before I was to come to start classes, Chicago decided that they were going to give me nice money to student aid and a grant that was more than what Princeton was offering. But by then I said no. Princeton is the place. So the best choice I ever made.
Let me just go ahead and silence them.
Yeah. Alright. What were your expectations coming to Princeton, and did Princeton live up to those expectations?
I had a lot of apprehension when I came to Princeton because I knew what Princeton was about from everything that I have read, and I did visit it, the school. But I guess I was a little cocky back then, thinking that I'm not going to have any problems. I'm smart enough. I can deal with it. But so my expectations were, it's going to be fine. I like challenges. But one thing that Princeton did that really, really helped and solidify my life in Princeton was that I was invited to a program here that lasted a month, basically for first year, for people that were going to college for the first time, which is in that case was me. I was first in my family to do that. And they were mostly minorities, meaning Spanish, Latins, African American, American Indians, etc. So the program was about 40 kids, I think, that the university felt were at a disadvantage because of their background, and a place like Princeton was going to be maybe a little different for them. So we got a lot of indoctrinated or classes and counseling by students that were upperclassmen. So it was great. I made some very good friendships. And out of that program, they're all in my class, I would say 90% of them not only finished, of course, but were probably the most successful in our class, as to then going to be leaders, doing well in grad school, etc. Out of that class came the first African American woman president in our class for Princeton. That never had an African American and a woman to be president of the class. And she then went to Harvard Law, and successful lawyer, etc., etc. So that program turned out to be great for me and turn out great leaders from Princeton, not just in our class, but in Princeton in general. So,
can you tell me what that program was called? Do you recall?
I don't.
No, that's fine. All right.
I don't recall the name of the program, but it was they had it for a few years. I don't know if they still have it. I know they had a celebration of anniversary celebration like a few years ago. So they changed the name, but the program I think still existed. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and what were your initial impressions of Princeton when you arrived here?
As I said earlier, I think I was a little cocky, thinking that I can swim like everyone else. I'm using a term swimming because in high school I was a swimmer. So when I was here, it was mandatory that you needed to know how to swim. That was part of your physical education here. So I actually tried out for the swimming team, and it was evident right away that there was no way that I was in the same caliber of competition in terms of for swimming. I use that analogy in terms of the academics. I thought that I was well versed in many things, but academically it was a challenge until I was able to really apply myself, and I did okay. But I was at a something earlier today in the university at a memorial service, and one of the guys that was doing the homily was saying, we miss the people that we're celebrating today because they died. But one of the things I remember is how much I learned in class, but how much more I learned, a lot more outside of the class, meaning those social interactions, and learn about life, learn about challenges, etc. So socially, I loved Princeton. I did great. Being a minority was not a problem for me. A lot of my friends were minorities. A lot of my friends were non-minorities. I was involved in many activities. I was in the sports. I was the first manager of the women's basketball team. The only guy actually they ever had that was manager of the women's basketball team, and nothing to do with being, a minority or anything like that. So it was a challenge, but it was a good challenge. It taught me a lot how to behave, how to interact with people later on in life. So
would you say that you felt like you fit in when you arrived to Princeton?
Did I fit in when I first arrived to Princeton? No. And yes, I know it sounds contradictory, but after being here for a month, I got to know the campus very well. I knew some of the professors already, because some of them actually were teaching some of the courses in that program that we had. So when freshman week came, people were asking, do you know how to get to Makash Walk or whatever? And I was, oh yeah, go here, go there. And I was meeting people thinking that I was already like a sophomore basically, but I wasn't, of course. And immediately, I already had friends that I made in the program that some of them actually became roommates. So they were my friends, and I made new friends. So socially, I swam through. I mean, I had my Latin friends, I had my white Anglo-Saxon friends, I had my African friends, and we all interacted. I mean, we were not separated. So it was comfortable, very comfortable for me, yes. But one of the things is I had the support. I had the support of my, Latino friends that I already had met, or the African friends, and my new friends, the ones that came from the prep schools and so on that perhaps decided to look down or said, I never let that get to me. I didn't find that much because soon enough, I was in the same playing field as they were. So,
What was your major, and were there other Latino students in that major, and did that have any influence when you were choosing your major?
Yes. I mean, what was my major, and did it have an influence on me? I started coming from a Latin.
Can you paraphrase it?
He's working on it.
Yeah. Okay. My major, when I was an undergraduate, I first came with the idea that I was going to be a pre-med, that I was going to go to medical school. Coming from a Latin family, you're going to be either a lawyer, a priest, or you're going to take over your family's business. Well, my family's business was in the restaurant, and not a great restaurants, but middle of the road things back in South America where they live, and I didn't want that. I do not want to be a lawyer. I distrust lawyers, so that was not going to be. So doctor, medicine, that was what I was going to be. And that's why I almost went to Chicago, because they had a special program that I was able to get in, but money. So I came here. When I came after I got admitted, I met with this guy that was heading a special program that was the history and philosophy of science. It sounds like a good thing, for a cocktail party, but it's a lot more than that. So when I came for my major, I majored in history. But I also went and got 2 certificates with like minors, let's call it. One in history and philosophy of science, which was really my concentration, and the other one was in Latin American studies. So of course, Latin American studies, there were a lot of Latinos in there. And in history and philosophy of science, there were people in the science. Even though after sophomore year, when I took organic chemistry, basically that separates the boys from the men. So I knew that I was not going to go to medical school. I just not cut out for medicine. But I like science. I love the history of science. So I continue in that. And when I graduated, I got my degree in history and 2 certificates, one in Latin American studies and one in, I always like politics, Latin politics, and the other one in the history of science, history and philosophy of science. And to this day, from that department, some of them are still my best friends. So.
Awesome. Did you take any courses that touched on Latino-related issues?
Yes. I took courses that in the Latin American Studies program. One that comes to mind was Professor Peter Wynn in the history, different politics, and he was a center left, more to the left. So I took a lot of courses that dealt with politics in Latin America, in Chile, in Cuba. Part of my family is very leftist. I'm center. Family that is from my country, from Ecuador. So I lived the communist, regimes, military regimes. So I've always been interested in politics, but never want to get into it. I'm just interested in trying to make a difference. So yes, there were many Latinos in. Although I took literature, I took Spanish literature, and I remember the Professor Molloy, an Argentinian woman, and she was very tough on the Latin people. And I think I got like a B or B minus in the course. It was high. And when I went and showed that to my family, my aunt and uncle, it's like, how can you, you're Latin, and why could you get a B, B minus? I say, well, people that are Americans, they take English literature and they don't get A's, they get B's and C's. Besides, she's very tough. So anyway.
What was your thesis topic and how did you find that experience?
My junior paper, when I was here, I did it on yellow fever, which had an impact on Central America. So I continued with that theme on my senior thesis. And it was the conquering of yellow fever back in the early 1900s. It was a very well-known Cuban doctor, Carlos Finlay. That last name is Latino. Anyway, and he discovered about the mosquitoes that they carry. So it was wonderful because the research took me to New York Public Library and reading all magazines, all newspapers in Spanish, and it was fascinating. So it was painful because the research took me, and my thesis was big, but was well received. So yes, I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Great. And what was your social life like at Princeton?
Sadly to say, my grades in Princeton suffered because, as my family will tell you, I was having too much fun, partying too much in Princeton activities outside of the classroom instead of being in the classroom. So I don't deny it. I learned socially. It was wonderful. I had let's call it significant other, girlfriend, whatever, starting my freshman week in Princeton. And I always had my group of friends. So African Americans, WASP, and you name it. I had the range, and I was a popular guy back then. So it was great. Social life for me was terrific.
Okay, great. And what activities did you participate in? You mentioned you were involved in a lot of things.
I started a Latin American social type of club. You know, I mean, we had the Third World Center, but I felt that the Latin Americans, the South Americans, were underrepresented. So started a group that was fun, social, but I was big in the newspaper, the college newspaper, in the business side. Always been in the business side. I was involved in the humorous magazine called The Tiger, that is in one of the oldest college humorous magazines in the country. And to this day, I'm still involved. I'm on the graduate board. Been on the graduate board for many years. I participated in photography. I love photography. Creative. I mean, taking photographs. And I took photography courses, history as well as applied photography here. I was all over the place. And I participated in, as I said, I was manager of the first, well, back then it was not the first, the Princeton women's basketball team, the varsity team. As well, I was in one of my favorites was I was the coxswain of the heavyweights crew team. Now me, I'm a shrimp, I'm short, but back then I was in great shape, and I was telling these guys at 180 pounds, you're not rowing well, do this, do that. So that was one of the best experience that I had. And not a traditional thing that a Latin guy would do, especially coming from a South American country. But I was a coxswain of the heavyweights crew from Princeton. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Did you join any eating clubs? Why or why not?
It's interesting. Yeah, it's a love story that many of us Latinos have. Back then, we had these. We still do the Third World Center. That was like an own clubhouse, and I spent time there. Great friendships, but I have friends in the clubs also. And when I was time to join as an upperclassman, I joined I bicker, quote unquote, which is a process that you go through being admitted. You get an interview, you can get hosed down if one doesn't take you, blah blah blah. And I had a lot of friends that I was working in the newspaper, the magazine, as well as Tiger magazine, and many of them, people join different clubs from different groups or for different reasons. A lot of them are social, of course. So I liked the Quadrangle Club, and I became a member there in my junior year. However, most of my friends were seniors from that club. So when they graduated, that was the end of my junior year. I still have friends that were from my class, but at that time, many of them from the other clubs didn't feel happy for whatever reason, for food or whatever, and I was already in the crew team. So in the crew, when they practice, we finish late, so we run back to the club to get dinner, and it was two clubs that saved the food, and that was not Quadrangle. But one of the clubs, it was Cottage, a lot of my friends were not happy there, so we then got together, a whole bunch of us, and reopened a club that had been closed for like 3 years called the Cloistering Club.
This is an eating club?
An eating club. And so we reopened that club. I was not an officer, but I was involved in the reopening, and we had a section of about 100 kids, which was pretty good, in terms of juniors and seniors. So I was my senior year there, but juniors also came in, and it was one of the best things that I did. So today, I am the president of the graduate board of Cloistering Club. So, and we're 110 years old. So it has made a big difference in my life. So.
Okay, awesome. What was the relationship between Latino students and eating clubs in your eyes?
Back then, it was divisive. It was not a love affair.
You said the question.
Oh, back when I was back in my years in the mid 70s, most of the Latin students did not look kindly to the clubs, to the eating clubs, because let's face it, many of them were, a bit, I don't want to say racist, but if you were Jewish or if you were black or if you were Latino, the chances of getting into that club or that club, it wasn't big, wasn't good. And they would take your, I hate to say this, you're talking minority because they have to, or because they feel like they needed to. But so a lot of the Latinos will shun against that. But it started changing during my time. It started changing, and many of us, the Latinos, joined clubs back then, and still participated in the Third World Center, like I did. So we didn't lose that tie. We didn't say, oh well, I'm no longer with you guys. I'm now with this. And back then, at the beginning, when I was a freshman, there was a sense of reverse discrimination, in the sense that when you went to what we call commons back then, not the eating clubs, but the facility where you go to have your meal, you would have the tables that the African American group would segregate, not because they were told, go back to the room or go back to they wanted to be separate. And some Latinos, they also, so it was like a reverse discrimination in the sense that say, you're either with us or you're with them. And I chose to be the middle, I'm with both. And soon enough, I think that became very clear. And it was not a militant thing. Although I did get militant with some people were trying to divest from South Africa, investments that the university had at the time. I actually was part of a sit-in in the president's building in Nassau Hall, being militant, but it wasn't because I was Latino or it was because we whites and blacks and Latinos felt very strong about that issue. It was about a political issue or something like that. But the Latinos, to go back to the eating clubs, it was more of a, let's wait and see. I decided to just plunge in and bridge the gap, as they say. I had no problem.
Okay. And can you tell me how Princeton affected, excuse me, your life and career subsequently today?
Well, it has affected my life in a social way. Some of my best friends to this day are people that I met here, men and women. Socially, so I go away with them in vacation with my significant other, or things like that. My ex always loved to make a point. Oh, he went to Princeton. He was like, and I always try to just downplay that. Economically, it pushed me. I had the best time. I didn't have the best grades because I was having too good of a time, as my parents would have said. But after Princeton, I knew I was not going to go to medical school, as I said earlier. But I liked I like finance. I like business. I went to graduate school at NYU in New York, and I got a master's in business administration and international finance. So I knew I did not want to be an investment banker and work crazy hours or make tons of money and be miserable, like many of my friends did. So I got lucky and I got recruited by a few companies, and I got recruited by back then United Fruit Company or United Brands. You probably know one of the main things that they do is called Chiquita bananas. So coming from a banana country, quote unquote, which is Ecuador, where I'm coming from, in my class, which hardly any Ecuadorians have come through Princeton, but there were two Ecuadorians, and I was one. The other one, his name is John Rojas, was my roommate for 1 year. And he went to Stanford Business School. I went to NYU Business School. When we both graduated, where do we ended working with? He went to work for Dole, which is a banana company, and I went to work for United Fruit Company, banana company, and I worked for them. tour all Latin America, well, Central America. I used my language, my Spanish, and I was really felt that I was making a difference, helping those communities, my people, through my business, through my job. But I lived in Panama, Jamaica, countries that I felt great at. Unfortunately, the company sort of was bought out and moved to Cincinnati, which was not the place that I wanted to go live at. So I left and I became what I said I was not going to do, which is work for a bank. But I was not an investment banker. Eventually, I went to work for International Planned Parenthood, again trying to make a difference. And then for the last 26 years, and this is where Princeton has made a big difference, I got together with a Princeton alum, who was a couple years older than me, who was having problems with his company. He's a musician. He's a band leader. He's a singer. Extremely wealthy, so he doesn't need to work. He was also a lawyer, a big lawyer. And he asked me if I could do, and I knew him, if he can help him in his company because he was having financial difficulties. And I said, yeah, okay, I'll help you for a few months and so on. That was 26 years ago. So I'm running the company. I don't sing. I don't play an instrument. Well, I play the kazoo, but you don't want to hear that. We perform live performances throughout the country. And now that COVID is somewhat over, we perform here at reunions at Princeton. We're performing tonight. So it has made a big difference. And he can retire if he wants. And he said, you can run the company after this. But as long as he doesn't want to retire, I'm not retiring. I like to retire, but I cannot afford to retire yet. So in that sense, Princeton is in my life. It has made a huge difference.
Great. Hey, is Marsh on the phone? No? Okay. So this is the closing up question.
Sure.
What would Jose today tell younger Jose, or any advice, or just anything you'd want to tell him? With all the knowledge you have and things you've learned.
It's a question if you would start Princeton again now, what would you do differently? So it's sort of the same thing. And I graduated 45 years ago. I would say the only thing that I would do differently is perhaps, and I say perhaps, is apply myself more academically. Because Princeton is a wonderful, incredible place to do research, to learn. I learn about life, I learn about people, I learn about communities so much while I was here, but all of that was outside the classroom. Yeah, I had great relationships with professors who taught me academically to see things differently. I was not afraid to challenge, to ask, and that is the advice that I would give other Jose's. Because I started saying to you earlier, I felt cocky back then. Yeah, I can do this. Well, it was a challenge. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to say no. I say yes too many times. I got involved in too many things. I spread myself too thin. I learned, I had fun, but I should have structured myself a little bit better. Thank God I did not flunk out. I came close, but once you get a degree from Princeton, they're not looking to see if you had a 3.9 or a 3.6 or a 3.4 average. The fact that you made it, that you graduated, it's a big thing. I became president of my class as an alumni class. I've been involved in the class affairs. I've been giving awards, and I do a lot for Princeton because I love it, and I want to give the opportunity to new generations, to come in and to do better than I did. And I contribute whatever I can financially. Advice, I do help students. I interview some of them if they want to come into Princeton. I advise them. So again, the advice is don't be afraid. Shoot for the stars. Get involved. Say no. Say yes when you know need to, and challenge. Ask. If you don't ask, you won't get a yes or a no answer or a maybe. Don't be complacent. Be a fighter. So.
And let's say like clean sandbag. You said that's the advice I would tell the older Jose. You want to say younger, not older.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So what do you want me to say?
Jose, you could say the Jose today would tell young
Yeah.
Jose.
So the Jose today will say to the young Jose from way back, be bold, challenge, say yes, but say no a lot of times. Ask a lot of questions. Be a fighter. Don't be afraid to fail. That is a big thing. Don't be afraid to fail, because if you don't try it, you will not know what if you would have later says, what if I had done this or that? So just go for it.